What reasons could I possibly have for exploring Catholicism? Well, it's funny to think about, but for Protestants, yeah, it's a big deal. Uh, but in reality, if you go back to the Reformation, you know, Protestantism is a schism off of the Catholic Church. And I think that might have been pretty one of the first things that got my attention to think about when it comes to church history. That it's not Jesus, Paul, then Martin Luther, right? There's a solid millennium and a half there that needs to be explored and covered properly. And if you don't do that from a Protestant angle, which I'm sure there is one, if you don't do that properly, eventually some people are going to start asking questions, right? Like, hey, what about all this, right? The church fathers and doctors of the church, at least according to the Catholic church history. And I think that that's valid and should be explored and understood properly, right? Better yet, gleaned from. These are traditions that are very valuable, I think, for Christian theology. And you have an impoverished Christian tradition if you're not incorporating some of this that's coming from, well, Catholicism, whether it's Aquinas or Augustine or Ambrose, whoever. There are amazing teachers and doctors and fathers of the church that we don't get to appreciate and glean from if we are Protestant. The other thing I'll add is I've been using the word Protestant a lot, but really what I am is an evangelical, which does not neatly fall into any broad traditions that you'll find in mainline denominations, Protestant denominations. So we're really a subsect of Protestantism in America, American evangelicalism, that, if anything, is rooted in Baptist, I suppose. But anyways, that's a little bit of gray area for me, and not really discussed and understood by the parishioners, people that attend church. See, parishioner is a traditional word that's not even used in evangelical churches. So there's a lot of dots that need to be connected. So that's a motivation for me to explore Catholicism. One, the vast sweep of church history that's not understood by Protestants properly because it's inconveniently Catholic for them. And two, just the my lack of interest in what American evangelicalism has to offer at the moment, which is basically this Christian subsect of Protestantism, and it doesn't even fall neatly into the Protestant categories. 3, because you can't just have 2 bullet points, you have to have 3. 3 is the classical education stuff that I've been heavily researching on for the last 5-6 years already. And so you run into Catholics when you're exploring classical education, because there's a whole lot of Catholics involved in classical education. First of all, in the 20th century, it was the Catholics holding down the fort for the classical model of education. And they're very big on the 90s, post-90s revival in classical education. So kudos to them for that. Connected with classical education is the idea of truth, goodness, and beauty. And I was watching a conversation with Bishop Barron and William Lane Craig. And William Lane Craig was my main guy for apologetics, Christian apologetics, for years. But Bishop Barron said something that was a wake-up call for me, and kind of, based on Craig's reaction, kind of went right over his head. But he couldn't absorb the point because it was just outside of his paradigm a little bit too much, I suppose. I don't know. But basically, truth, goodness, and beauty are all avenues to God because they're all grounded in God. And they're beautiful. I mean, they're wonderful abstract conceptions. Beauty as a means for evangelization was the point that Bishop Barron was making, and that really got me thinking. And it lined up with the angle that the Catholic Church has chosen to take, whether it be through architecture or paintings, etc., music, chanting, that sort of stuff. I don't know. That list could go longer. But the point is that beauty, those are all beautiful aspects of Christian culture, and that heritage largely comes from Catholicism. So we have to think about that when it comes to evangelizing the West, which is something that, I've thought a lot about. How do we do that best? So we need to think about beauty. Protestants think the way to evangelize is through truth. Whether it's true or not is really the bottom line. And that's fine. That's true. That's not false. That's definitely a valid approach. But truth, goodness, and beauty, the trifecta we're looking for, I think, for an effective evangelization or witness of Christ on the earth today, I think you've got to take into consideration all three. So that got me thinking of a weak point in Protestantism when it comes to evangelizing, and a strong point for Catholicism.